me about this. Your brother, Manu, it's I understand loss, I understand pain. Very different circumstances. Lost my mom to cancer, and you recently lost your brother to cancer as well. So we can definitely relate on that level, and it's definitely one of the things that are very difficult. Sunday was August 7th, and it was 3 years, and I'm thinking, where did time go?
Wow.
Right? So I remember like yesterday, and it's taken me a few days this week to kind of get back to my groove because it definitely you start replaying moments, and then there's trauma and muscle memory of the pain in you, right? So you have to go through those things. How have you been able to stay strong? Because doctor, I look at you and I'm thinking, she doesn't crack.
Oh, I crack.
And it's an inspiration. It
My
truly
husband
is.
to glue me all together again. Um, how do I didn't have a choice. You know, when you go through a tragedy, it definitely changes you. Cancer, and I say this, cancer just doesn't affect the person who has it. Even if the person's gone, that pain, that suffering, it may not be the physical, but that emotional pain is still always there. And, when you lose somebody for anything, and especially watching them deteriorate, somebody young, um, your world stops. And the world is, like when we cremated Manu, the next day I was like, he's gone. Now his physical body is also gone. And the world was kept going. TV was playing the same show, sun
Yeah.
shining, people are doing their things, and your world has stopped.
Mhm.
And you're almost playing catch up because you don't know what's happened. And you almost feel the sense of, like you just said, 3 years has passed, and what's happened? Life's been going on. You almost feel that guilt, like, did I not miss him enough? Should I feel guilty of being happy and
Mhm.
not missing him at certain times, but missing tremendously? So there's a lot, but staying strong, I didn't have an option. I had to help my parents who were suffering their loss and their grieving, their only son and youngest child. Um, my kids, I had to be strong for them. I still had a business to take care of. I still had to, I was still living and I had to live, and I couldn't go into depression. I had to pull out of it. And
Mhm.
this book, this podcast that I did for Life Interrupted has been my way of grieving, um, that I was doing in isolation because I didn't have Manu around me. I didn't have my parents close to me.
Mhm.
So I brought the world with me.
You know what? What a beautiful way to grieve. And I mean, for myself, it's having people like yourself to talk to and understand, how do you do it? What are some things you've done to honor someone that's no longer here with us, but at the same time find peace and move through this life gracefully. And
Yeah. It,
that's what they would want for us. As
mhm.
cliche as that is, it is very true. They would. Would they want us to
Yeah.
suffer? Would they want us to feel the heartbreak and the pain and the feeling? It's hard. It's really, really hard. And I'm sure um, for you, when that anniversary came around, or for your family, it
Mhm.
was absolutely gut-wrenching.
It's very gut wrenching. Like tomorrow is Rakhi, which is very symbolic in our culture in
Yes.
Hinduism for,
Yeah.
and I have, and I never got to tie him every single year because we lived far apart. However, that was something I mailed to him. And, you go to the shop and I still buy him one. And I have a tree that's planted in his honor, with a bench with his name, and it kind of gives me a focus point. And I tie it to the tree. It's a
Oh,
living thing. But these are the small little things that I do to honor him.
right.
And, we celebrate his birthday just
Right.
like,
And doctor, just on that note, for the
yep.
listeners, what is Rocky? I mean, of course, we would understand that, but what exactly is that?
So Rakhi, I'm of Hindu, or we are of a Hindu base. So Rakhi is a thread that a sister ties to her brother. It symbolizes the bond between a brother and a sister. And in turn, it's the love and the devotion and taking care of each other. So it's just a manner, it's a simple thread, but it means a lot more.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, absolutely. And it's nice that you have somewhere physical to tie it to, because you can symbolize it as you can talk to him, you can do whatever you want, and it's right there in that moment. So it's
It's right.
beautiful.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so you do these little things to allow yourself to grieve, and not to hold back, because it really needs to release. Like, just like stress, you cannot hold, you need to find an outlet. Grief needs to find an outlet. Otherwise, it definitely consumes you.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
and sharing and hopefully finding other people the
Mhm.
support that they need. So, yeah.
Yeah. And it's important to find a healthy outlet. I think oftentimes people can lead to the wrong decisions or go into
Right.
alcoholism or substance abuse. And I think it's important to find something that is good for you, good to you, and where you can fragilely and gently go through it and not put yourself through quote unquote hell.
Yeah, no, mind is a very dangerous thing
It
if left
really is.
alone.
Yes.
So, and my whole purpose of sharing history, besides honoring him and besides all of that, is bringing attention to, what this cancer is,
Absolutely.
how it even affects the young. And we think we're just, untouchables and we're going to live forever. But even the young have it, and bringing awareness to that
Hmm.
and how his cancer was dealt with. That I wish things had played out differently. Maybe COVID played a role. Maybe he would be sitting here with us had he been getting treatment in the US versus Canada.
The bond of a brother and sister bond. What was it like growing up? And were you guys growing up in Calgary, or you guys are from the Middle East originally, aren't you?
Right. So I was born in India. Manu was born in Abu Dhabi in
Okay.
UAE. And so I was 7.5 when he was born. And so he was a few months old when we tied that Rocky.
Oh.
And yeah, so we grew up in the Middle East. We didn't have family in the sense we didn't have our uncles and the core, grandparents around us. It was just the two of us. And we were latchkey kids. So, as the older sister, as we grew older, it was my job to take care of him,
Right.
guide him, school studies. Um, and we would go to India for 2 months every year. And then I came to the States for my studies for undergrad, and Manu was maybe 10 at that time. And he moved to Canada in his teens, early teens. And so we were apart, but we were still together, and he kind of followed my footsteps into the field of dentistry. I graduated dental school, he graduated high school. And so,
Wow.
yeah. So certain things he followed me through,
Yeah.
and otherwise he created his own path. He was more into sports. He played rugby. I could not watch him playing rugby. He was short in stature, but he was he was a pretty rugged kid.
Yeah.
So you see all these big 6 feet guys plummeting over this 5'2" thing. And I was like, I can't watch this. but but yeah, no, he was full of life. And one of the things that bond us together, because we didn't grow up with Indian culture. So when he got into University of Calgary, he kind of found his Indian roots, and he started playing dancing bhangra and going to
Oh,
Indian
yes.
parties. In college, his voicemail would say "Kidda," like hello, Punjabi. So that kind of united us. We loved,
Yeah.
and one of the last things that music united us, because we were so far apart, living in different parts of the world. Dentistry united us. We would talk about cases. We would go to courses together. He flew to New York. I went to DR together. And another thing was just pure love of music and Hindi movies. And even to his last days, he introduced me to Diljit Dosanjh, which is
Oh,
the
yes.
GOAT. Um, and so every time I hear that song, I think back to Manu, us sitting. He barely could talk in his last days. And he's like, check this guy out. and he liked him because he was also short in stature and he could dance. And Manu's like, he's so awesome. He's so good. Listen to that. And do you know? So every time those songs come out, it brings me back to that moment in time. And
What
yeah,
songs particularly that kind of give it to you?
do you know by Diljit
Okay.
Dosanjh and Goat, GOAT. Yeah.
GOT. Okay. Greatest of all time.
Yep. Greatest of all time. Every time I hear it, I'm like, I know you're up there doing Bhangra and listening to this.
I love it. That's amazing.
Yeah,
What was, were you like a mother to Manu?
practically.
A
We were
second
so
mother?
far apart, second mother. So so he would shy away from a few things telling me, he would share that more with his friends and he had a great
Right.
group of close friends. But I was kind of also the buffer between the parents too. A lot of times he would tell me like, oh, I went sailing and our boat flipped. Don't tell Ma and Papa. All right. We were going golfing and we kind of did something silly. Don't tell Ma and Papa. I'm like, okay. And it was the same thing with the cancer journey. When
Right.
his initial diagnosis came, he's like, it's cancer. Just give me a few moments. I will tell them, but I wanted to tell you first. So it
What
was,
was your reaction like? What was your reaction like when he first told you this is
that's very interesting because my reactions were very different. When he showed me the initial lesion, it was on a WhatsApp message, and
Mhm.
I showed it to 5 other surgeons. They all said it's cancer, hands down. And, when you're young, you're healthy otherwise, you have no predisposing conditions besides being a male. He's like, I don't smoke, I'm healthy, I eat well, I exercise, I go to the gym. I can't have cancer. And part of it's denial, part of it's ego, part of it's like
Of
cancer.
course, yeah. And on top of it, it's irony. It's like you're a dentist.
He's
He's a
like, I
doc,
don't know
he's a
this, right?
dentist. Exactly.
It's
He's a dentist, you're a dentist. You guys are both doctors in that field of
in that
world.
profession. Yep. And so when I saw him for the Stampede in July of 2019, I saw the lesion and I'm like, geez, Manu, why have you not biopsied this? And he said, I was waiting for you to come visit. I will biopsy it after you leave.
And how
And
old was he at this time, just for the listeners
I
too?
just turned 32. Just turned. So
Wow.
June, he turned 32. And he showed me earlier part of June, it had been troubling this lesion. And when he biopsied, it was July. And so he was just turned 32, prime of his time. He had this startup practice in Northwest Calgary that he had started from scratch from 2016, and he was doing so well in it. He had just bought a house. We actually were there he had bought a house late 2018. So when we were there in the summer of 2019, we had a housewarming party. I mean, he bought, it was in Northwest Calgary with a view of the mountains. He loved
Oh,
it.
no. What area did he live in?
So he worked in Montgomery and he lived 5 minutes from there, Northwest
Oh,
Calgary.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
So
Definitely the
beautiful.
mountain view, the west. Yes.
He was on a little bit of a hill, and yeah, definitely. And he loved to, he would be out kayaking, go to the Bow River. So he loved life. So anyway, so when he first told me, I kind of knew this was coming because what I had been told by other surgeons, but it hadn't been confirmed. And my dad asked me, because I also lost my grandmother, my dad's mom, to cancer. So his first question to me was, is he going to die? And my answer was no. Manu is healthy. They're going to just excise the lesion. They're going to do the tongue resection. He's going to get chemo radiation. He's going to pull through, because I'm thinking he's not diabetic. He does not have other health issues. He's not a cardiac patient. He's healthy. And he was so mentally and physically strong that I felt that once he's done with surgery, he's going to recover. And he was.
Yeah. Just on a side note, when he mentioned it to you, what was he feeling? Just for anybody that's saying, hey, do I have something awkward or I'm feeling different in my mouth? What exactly was he feeling?
So pain, it was on one side of the tongue. And that's what very important for people to know, is that you could have an allergic reaction and be on both sides, or you bite your cheek, it's different. But anything that's non-healing after 2 weeks in the mouth and it painful or non-painful doesn't matter, but he was feeling a lot of pain on eating spicy foods. He couldn't eat certain like home cooked food, or even if we were out having sushi, he's like, oh, the wasabi hurts. So spicy foods, constant pain, trouble talking because it was getting large on the side of his tongue. And it was only on one side, not both. So something that's unilateral, that's it. But his experience mostly was pain.
Right.
And inability to talk. All right, he didn't have any lymph node involvement at that time. So he didn't feel any lump or mass. It was just a lesion on his. And what he felt, did you ask me how he felt when he got the diagnosis?
Initially when he had reached out to you and said, sister, something's going on here, what exactly is this? What was he feeling? So obviously you mentioned
he was like,
spices, certain foods. He noticed that something's not right here. It's been a few weeks and I'm not healing. This is not a blister.
Right, it's not a blister because it's not going away. It's been there for months. And one of the diagnoses, or the differential diagnosis, was wisdom teeth, and he had his wisdom teeth pulled. It still didn't heal. And I was not in his care, or he was not under my care, so I couldn't monitor the month-to-month progresses, but it was definitely getting worse. And he thought it was lichen planus, which is an autoimmune condition, but it should have been bilaterally. I wish he had an earlier diagnosis. He had a later diagnosis that pushed the treatment, but even then it was still caught within stage 2. So his chances of survival would have been great had he gotten the appropriate care. And
so of course, he's showing you this stuff. You show 5 surgeons. You get back to him and say, okay, I think you need to go look at this a little further. He goes and does that. It's confirmed it's cancer. What are some of the next things that go on for the two of you and your family? So mom and dad obviously find out. First questions, is he going to pass away? Once that's all done, what happened then?
So we're clinicians, right? So our job is to fix the problem, right? I did not think he's going to die. We need to do this. We need to do that. My father said, how can we fix this? What do you need to do? And he got a great team at Foothills, and he had like 6, 7 surgeons. You had a team. He got in with the Cancer Institute, Tom Baker. He had plastic surgeons, ENTs. He had a what do you call it? He had half of his tongue resected, graft placed from his heart, from his hand, and a skin graft from his thigh. And he had lymph node involvement as well. So he had his neck resected and lymph nodes removed. So it was a major 8-hour surgery with vascular, plastics, ENT, oral surgeons, of course, and a host of nurses. And I still remember him telling me, he's like, Didi, I got a 4-hour OR slot, but I need 8 hours. They really did expedite him considering his age and that he was enrolled, and it was a dentist. So he had a few oral surgeon friends kind of push the envelope a little, and they couldn't get a full 8-hour OR time consecutively. It took a little while, but they got it in August. We even thought about bringing him here. Anyway, he got the time. So he's like, I'm going in. And
mom and dad are here in Calgary. Is that correct?
Correct. They stayed with him. He was in 10 days in the hospital.
Right.
I did not fly for the surgery.
And just for the listeners, when you bring up the word Didi, that means sister.
Older sister.
Older sister. Yes.
Yeah,
in Hindi.
Yes. Yes, out of respect. And so we were like, surgery's going to happen. We're going to take out the lesion. It's out of your body. And so our job was just focusing on the next thing, not dwelling in, okay, this has happened. What did we do to do, why he got it? That was not the question. It was, let's fix this. What do we need to do? Should we bring him to the US? Is he getting the treatment quick enough in Canada? And which he did. So we let the treatment happen there, and he recovered very quickly. He got the surgery in August of 2019. He flew in September that year to visit me in New York. And he was so excited because after he dealt with cancer, his first thing to do was buy a Porsche. And so I remember him coming here to New York. He's like, I'm going to go shopping. I need to look the part of owning the Porsche. I'm going to
I love it. Yes.
yeah, no, he had this renewed sense of life once he had the first initial surgery. He's like, life gave him a second chance. And he's like, why am I going to wait till I'm 60, 70 to do the things that I want to do? And I'm going to go buy the car now. And he got a dog and he bought the car and he was so excited. And October, he was back seeing patients. He was a solo practitioner. And he had a team relying on him. He had a team of 7 or 9, and he had nobody else paying the bills. So he's like, I'm back at work. I'm going to go see my patients. But he started to see a decline in his health, in the sense his arm would hurt where the graft was retracted form, and he would feel numbness after working for long hours, some mental fogness. So he started to slow down and see if he could bring on an associate, and eventually he sold his practice.
At such a young age. So how long did he have that practice for? Because graduating
2012, he graduated dental school from UBC, and he opened in 2016.
Okay.
So he used to volunteer. He volunteered for CUPS, which is the Calgary Urban Project Society. He would do mission trips. He went 2 trips to Peru. He loved giving back to the community. And even in his practice, he just felt that money was not the object to hold people back from dentistry. He would discount services, or talk to his friends. He would be giving his patients a ride back home if they didn't have the cab fare. Like, he was just a giving person to begin with. And so that practice was his baby. He planned everything by himself, every little, like, from the color, the paint to the handle knob. Like, he did a lot of it. Everything was him. That was his baby.
What was it called, his practice?
Montgomery Dental Center, MDC. Okay. Yep. And he sold it after his metastasis, during his chemoradiation in the summer of 2020.
Okay, so 2019, September, he goes back to work.
October,
and he's realizing there's a little bit of pain. He's getting fogginess.
Mm-hmm.
That's in October 2019. How does he decide, okay, I need to step away from this at such a young age? Or did he go again to the doctors and they realized something's here, and he said, all right, I'm done?
So and this is where things went awry, because he never got chemoradiation after the first surgery. When he was open with the flap and everything, he never received. I think he was on the borderline, and I wish they had done an aggressive treatment on him. This is where I fault the Canadian system. And they did not push for chemoradiation. And, there's a lot of gray area there. But then in April, we were actually planning a trip to Hawaii for the April break. And we canceled it because COVID had just started to kind of hit the world. And, especially the States was major lockdown. Hawaii closed borders. So we canceled our trip. Yeah, we were supposed to go mid-April 2020. March, our Nani passes away, our grandmother, mother's mother. And 3 days later, Manu has a swelling in his neck post a filling appointment, like a regular filling. That swelling was the same side of the initial lesion on the tongue on his neck, and that was biopsied for squamous cell carcinoma. So it was suggested that when they did the initial surgery, they did not go deep enough to remove the lymph nodes, and they had gone wide enough but not deep. So cancer was remaining, and hindsight's 2020. So had he gotten chemoradiation, this chances would have been less. Another misstep was the cancer returned within 8 months, which is indicative that it is an aggressive cancer. And they also found a lesion on his chest that was on the same side, on the left side of his body, that was like this ground glass opaque. So basically a chest lesion in his lungs, which was small. It was like under 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter. Wow. And they blew it off. They did not, it was too small to be biopsied, guaranteed, but they did not push for anything. They're like, oh, we'll just scan it in 6 months.
Mhm.
And they said, oh, you're coughing. It could be just you have a cough, or you have a chest, like a cold, and that's why there's that lesion. The metastasis was not on the agenda. So Manu went through another surgery in April, and they resected his tongue, took out the lymph nodes, and he got chemoradiation at the end of the summer. So his 34th birthday was during chemo. I think he got chemo for 6 weeks, and a few rounds of radiation. His neck was all burnt from the radiation. July 6th of 2020, he rang the bell after completing his surgery.
Right.
Sorry, treatment. Yeah.
So just as a family, your family, mom and dad, everyone going through these emotions, of course, cancer, now surgery. Now, yay, he's better.
Oh, he was
He's
great.
living life, got a dog, got a Porsche. It's exciting. He's living life to the fullest. And then again,
It's a crash.
it's a crash. What were you guys like during that time as a family and in terms of keeping your morale, your spirits up while still trembling inside? Although there's hope, there's still fear.
There was at this point, I don't think we understood what we were going through, because we were also hit with COVID,
Yes.
and I could not come visit him. The borders were shut. Canada was super strict about it. He's immunocompromised. Vaccines weren't available at this time. Just remind the listeners the time frame that we're doing. And the only way I could enter Canada was on a compassion release basis, which is a huge 8-page form, which has to be signed by doctors, it's a limited release. I can only go to certain places, has to be signed by the owners of the place, like my parents' house. Manu had to sign it off. So there was so much to do, and Manu was going through all of this. They said, don't come. There's no point in you coming. And so my parents were doing a lot of the navigation by themselves, which was very hard, because going to the doctor's visits, you weren't allowed inside due to COVID. So it was just Manu facing everything alone. And, position yourself, you're 34, you've already done 2 surgeries, and you're going through these motions. You're trying to make these educated decisions, but you don't know what mental capacity Manu had at that point. He was very brave through all of it. He shielded us from a lot of the information, but he had to make decisions for himself. And knowing that life has a termination date that's a little sooner than we anticipated. And we were also, my parents were a non-medical field, so they're scared. They don't know what's going on. They've seen cancer up close, and they know its ugly side. And that's the last thing. You come to this part of the world hoping for a better life for your children, right? It's the Canadian American dream, right? And now you have the biggest nightmare of your life, and you're facing it with no help. Even
we're in a global pandemic, right?
Global pandemic. So even people wanted to help, you can't. No. I remember planning his 34th. I really wanted to throw his 35th birthday, but 34th birthday, I planned it, and we did a drive-by. At that time we were doing drive-by. It's summer, so I'm like, everybody come and wish, just put on a mask and just wish him from the outside. He'll just sit on the stoop and, on the steps of his house, and just come wish him. And
had he moved back home to mom and dad's home?
No, he lived in his own house.
Okay.
Yeah, he lived in his own house. My parents made the trip back and forth, and they're elderly. My dad was retired. Mom was still working. Anyhow, but yeah, I don't think we processed what was going on. We were just checking off steps, trying to do the best we can to get him going,
Of course.
And Maya, the dog, brought him a lot of joy, because it was unconditional love without the fear of COVID. And once he finished his chemo radiation, he really did well. That's when he sold his practice. He decided, dentistry, I'm done with it. He wrote an article, he started writing, and that was his outlet, because he had no other way to express himself. And especially towards the end, when he couldn't talk much, but he loved to read. He was an avid reader, and he just found writing to be a solace. He couldn't go out, couldn't do much during the chemo radiation, so a lot of thought process, no visitors allowed. So imagine going through chemo. Whoever has gone through, it's no joke. It hurts. It's painful.
Of course.
After effects are painful. I mean, the vomiting, diarrhea, and all of that, food, hair loss, scars. And he did that alone. But sitting for hours, in the hospital with just this, or you're sitting across people who are going through it and you're seeing, the aftermath of it. So it's very tough. And so he had to be very emotionally strong to go through it. And we were just going through the motions at this point because
that's
world
brave of him.
yeah,
Exactly, right? Yeah,
yeah,
that's very brave of him. I mean, especially such a young age, such a young man, with so much life and hope and excitement for the future ahead of him. He has everything to look forward to. He's definitely made mom and dad proud, and his sister. Like,
yeah,
you've done it, son.
yeah. He
That
did.
is
He
the
accomplished. Yeah,
that is the dream. To
yeah,
have a good human being, a good brother, a good son,
yeah,
somebody that's helping society,
yeah. He was
right?
contributing. And whatever you worked for hard, your parents work hard for you, that you wish you accomplish, and you accomplish it, and then life throws you this loop.
Careful.
This, yeah, you just try to navigate and make sense of it. It's very hard to do so.
So we're in 2020. People are driving by to see him. He's at home. He starts to write. Manu starts to write. And what is Manu writing at this time?
So Manu just writes about life, and he started this journey. This is not my journey. This
Right.
is his. And he was featured in Dental Town, which is a magazine for dentists by dentists worldwide. It's
Right.
online, it's a print version. And he was on the cover of that magazine in 2019, just after his first surgery. And he talks about it. And it was actually the article, or he was featured because of his startup practice in Calgary, how successful he was. His clinic was featured on it. He was on the cover. And he talks about starting a practice after recession. But he also talks in that, Doctor Heal Thyself. That was his article. And he talks about his own cancer journey. So he started this topic. And he loved to write. He started writing these blogs. It was called Do a Good Job, which is a pun on our last name. And he was doing great in the summer. Again, we're in COVID. I have not been able to come visit at all because of border restrictions. And he started going for long drives because it's the summer. He's kayaking. These are all things that were COVID friendly activities to do.
Yes.
Walking with the dog, he was prime of his life. So that lesion that they found in April, he didn't have the follow-up in September. His follow-up happened April, so it should have been in October. It happened a month later in November. The lesion had grown 4 times the size. And he called me, and I remember I was driving from work. It was an evening, and he said, Didi, the lesion has grown 4 times the size. This is metastatic. I know I'm going to die soon, and I'm okay with it. And my first reaction was like, no, you're not. We're going to figure this out, because he was scheduled for a biopsy December 7th of 2020. And we said, no, this could be, I talked to my friends who are doctors. I had a radiologist. She said it could be a fungal infection. We have to biopsy. It could be an infection, because he was coughing. It wasn't COVID. He was negative for COVID. And so we were thinking of all other possible things, because nobody wanted to talk about death. We were not, we're not ready to give up hope. We're like, no, we're going to fight this, whatever it is.
What a time, though. I mean, we're in a global pandemic. We're seeing all over the news. People are passing away, hospitals. You can't go to the hospital. People are passing away alone. It's such a emotionally draining time already.
Right. Who do you
And
talk
then who do you talk to? And then on top of that, again, getting a hold of someone in that time period was nearly impossible, wasn't it?
Right.
Yeah. So mom and dad, did they know about what Manu had said to you at the same time, or was it later on?
No, he never told them that he was prepared. And so, but they knew this has come back. So actually, he was scheduled for December 7th for a biopsy of the lung lesion. And December 1st, he was taken into the hospital, and it was very casual, talking to
Hmm.
mom, talk to them every day. And Papa goes, Mom, Manu, we're just finishing up dinner. He's coughing a lot. We're going to take him to the ER. We go to the ER. They find out that he has pulmonary pleurosis. There was fluid in the lung lining, and they drained it. And I remember him texting me. I was at work the next day because he was admitted after dinner one night. And the next morning he was stayed for observation, and they drained the fluid. He sends me a picture. He's like, look, check out what they got out of me. And it was this fluid from his lungs, and that tested positive for squamous cell carcinoma. And every day my dad would take him to the hospital. He would get fluid drained. Then they would take a chest x-ray and send him home every day for a week.
Now, what is this, doctor? When they're draining your lungs, how are they doing so for a
So
listener to imagine this?
they put in a little tube through the ribs, and they drain out the fluid that's there. So because of the fluid buildup, it was hard for his lungs to expand, so he couldn't breathe. And that's why a lot of coughing and his inability to breathe. So it's very heavy and a lot painful too. And so imagine pushing a bubble through water, a puddle of water, and he couldn't contain space. So he couldn't. And so for that, they usually put in what's called a Plorex, which is basically a tube from the chest, and they did it on the side of his body.
Right.
And it constantly drains, and you actually have a drain outside your body, and a nurse comes in and drains you out. So that device wasn't placed until a week later. And every day my dad would drop him outside the hospital. You weren't allowed inside. And then Manu would get drained, chest x-ray to make sure all the fluid was removed, and then sent back home. And the next day the fluid would build up. And the reason why this happened was because of that metastasis of that lesion, chest lesion that was 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter in April that had grown. So the cancer was growing, and the cancer was metastasizing, and now we have fluid in the lungs, and this cancer was spreading. He finally got a PET scan. He never had a PET scan done. And that scan showed that he had metastasis down to his pelvic bone. So he was being admitted to December 31st or 30th, December 30th, he was admitted overnight until the 31st for high calcium levels. And that was because he was losing his bones, because he had cancer spread into his pelvic bone, and now he's losing that. And I remember I'm like, I just don't want him to spend New Year's in the hospital. Right. We didn't know, we didn't know how much time we had, right? So
no. And did you kind of make peace with it? Did mom and dad understand, okay, Manu's leaving us?
We didn't talk about it. So December, when this happened, my friend said, you need to drop everything and go. And I said, what do you mean? I've not been vaccinated at this time. And the vaccines weren't available. We were not in, as dentists, we were 1B category in the States. So not the emergency. ER doctors were first, and then, all the doctors, then dentists. So we were in the essential workers. But so I wasn't vaccinated. My vaccine appointment was in January. And I begged my dad to let me come. I said, you need to let me come, because I had gotten the feedback from my dentist, my friends who are doctors, who were seeing his reports, who were seeing the CT scans, who were seeing the PET scans, who were seeing the degradation of the disease. And in a clinical aspect, and they said, he does not have time. He's fluid in his lungs. It's a matter of months. Right. You need to go. You need to go. Right. I don't care how. I shut my practice. Yep.
So doctor, when you guys were doing this and thinking all these things, had Manu now had mom and dad take care of him at this time, or with the dog? Yeah.
They were taking Maya, everybody, they were taking care. And one of the things that we did do was Manu make sure that he writes a will. After when his second cancer came, we said, make sure you have a will in place.
Because and it's funny, at such a young age, how many of us do it?
I didn't get a will until he had cancer, and I'm much older than him, and I have kids. So we're like, Manu, because he was single and no kids, so we're like, make sure you have a will in place, because he had properties, he had cars, he had all this stuff, monetary. So we said, just make sure, it makes it easier. But we weren't expecting him to die so soon. We were just, you're going for surgery, make sure you have a will. But yeah, so December, I shut my practice just before Christmas for a week, and I did 2 weeks, 1 week to quarantine when I got back, 1 week to go there. And to go there, I had this special compassion release, which is only valid for a month. And it's a form, if anybody has done it, it's sent to the Ministry of Canada. They approve it, takes a few weeks, and only then can you fly. Then you also need a PCR test, all of that. Anyhow, I flew with the mask on, and for that 1 week, nobody saw my face because I kept my mouth. I was so scared that I don't give him COVID. He was immunocompromised. We tried to stay at 2 different levels, or if I saw him, I was far away from him with the mask on. If I ate, it was somewhere else, not near him, just precaution. And it was cold, frigid cold. And this kid, for me, as a kid, I watched him, I changed his diapers, watched him walk in front of me.
Yes.
I was 7.5 when he was born, could not, and he played rugby, dancing. I mean, he would dance for hours, could not walk to the bathroom. And I said, let me take you out for a drive in your Porsche. He's like, or let me take you to the balcony, get some fresh air. We'll go for a walk with Maya. He's like, no, the Calgary air, it's just so cold, it hurts. He had this chest port, which was done so poorly that he would complain. He's like, I can't lie down. He was on all these medications. And it would hurt. He couldn't even schedule even an appointment. He would be like gasping for breath to make one sentence happen. And the chest port is basically, like I said, they make a little cut through the ribs and they put the port in, and then you basically squeeze the fluid out, and he would drain about 1 liter of fluid a day.
A liter. Oh my
liter. And this, but the stitches were caught in his chest hair. They did not even shave him at the time of surgery. His blood pressure dropped during surgery, and he requested, he's like, I've been through countless surgeries. I've been through chemo radiation. Please give me an experienced surgeon to do my chest port in. And I did not. They gave him a resident, wasn't experienced, which is fine. It's a learning hospital, but he requested because of the situation. And she didn't even shave him. So when I saw him, and I have pictures of this, it's just like his, in between the sutures are his chest hair. And so the first day when they took off the Band-Aid, to expose the port, and he's cringing in pain. I'm like, why are you crying? He's like, every time she takes off the bandage, they're pulling on my chest hair. So the first thing I did was the palliative nurse came to the house. So when she was doing the drainage, I said, let's shave him. That was the first thing I did for him. Of course. Oh, let's shave it. Let's get it cleaned as best as we can. Make sure you shave him every few weeks, days. And then, and that made him a little bit better. So, but just, that's what I talk about, is this little things, that lack of empathy and care that he had throughout this whole, not everybody, but overall, had things gone a different way, I think he would be sitting here telling his story, not me. And so that was the last time I saw him, not knowing it would be the last time I'd see him. And it was funny, he would shy away from telling us things. Like I'd say, Manu, why is there calcium in your blood? Whenever he's like, I have low calcium, I have to go get, they have to counteract it. And he's like, yeah, I took too many calcium pills. I'm like, seriously, Manu? We all know it's because you're basically, it's your body is going through it. And then he was in isolation in January for 2 weeks. He was on a high level of antibiotics. There was fluid buildup, and they couldn't figure out why he had fluid buildup. And they kept draining it. This was on his chest and underneath the chest port, and they couldn't figure it out. They kept subjecting him to antibiotics, thinking it's a infection. And he went through diarrhea and vomiting, couldn't barely keep food down. He would walk around with a bag because this whole port is, attached to him. He can't go anywhere without this chest. No. And so he spent it in isolation. Visitors were allowed. My parents weren't allowed to go in because he was in isolation, and no friends were allowed to visit. So these are the periods of time that he wrote. And in January, he wrote his last blog, and which was on New Beginnings.
So this
And
is 2021. Just
correct, January of 2021. Yeah. So, and then fast forward February, by now he's complained so much about his chest port, they actually move it. They take out the old one, they put in a new one. And now he's, he's getting another lesion. So February 25th, he called me at work and he said, hey, you remember I've gotten this big drainage. I'm at the hospital. They were going to have plastics come drain it, but plastics doesn't want to drain this lesion until they know what it is that we're draining. So they did a biopsy on the lesion. It is squamous cell carcinoma. So the cancer is just eating him from inside out. And he said, I'm going to get chemo radiation. I'm going to finish in March and I'm going to have you come then, because I'd been pushing to come see him again. Mm-hmm. Because I knew, I've heard from other people who've gone through this and from other doctors, not his treating doctors, my friends, and they said his time is limited. I'm counting on making his 35th birthday happen in June. And they're like, you may not have till June. We're in February right now. I'm like, no, we've got to have until June. It's only 4 months. What do you mean? Okay. They're like, no. And anyhow, so he said, look, it's going to finish. I think, I forget what the date was. My husband hasn't seen him. So we both make a ticket to come on March 20th to Calgary from New York. Now we're vaccinated. We did this whole compassion release, got all the paperwork done. And now I appropriately block time off work. I still need to quarantine when I need to come back, all of that good stuff. And this is when my dad asked me that question again. Is he going to die? Which he asked me earlier. And this time I answered my dad and I said, yes, he is going to die. It's a matter of time. So do whatever he desires. Whatever foods he wants. He was very particular. He was on a keto diet. Don't feed the sugar. Sugar enhances cancer growth. So he stopped eating, even drinking coconut water. He would get zero free. He was so particular about, avocados, nuts, no carbs at all. Like we would have pizza. He would just eat the topping and not the crust. He was very, very particular. And that was the one thing he could control, his diet. Right? He couldn't walk, he couldn't talk, he couldn't see his friends, he couldn't do any activities. Maya too, she was a young puppy, very active. Like it was just hard for him to do anything else. So his writing, making Legos, yes, and watching movies. That was the only 3 things he could do. And his limited movement, he would just go upstairs to his room, come downstairs, and then stay in his, we actually had a hospital bed at this time in the house. It was all palliative care. So March 20th, my husband and I are looking forward to going on the trip. A week prior, and from me, at this point, it's been frequent calls. March 13th, which was a Friday, my parents called and said, Manu's had a leg swelling. He's going to the hospital. Don't call him. We're just going to get admitted. He's tired. Don't disturb him. He's going to get admitted overnight. Call him tomorrow. I said, sure, no problem. This is an ongoing, right? He's been in and out of hospital for a host of reasons. So I said, sure. March 14th, I'm working. March 12th. That was the night of March 12th. March 13th is a Saturday. I'm at work and I haven't heard from anything. I called my parents and I said, what's going on? He got admitted the night before. And they said, we're with the palliative team right now. We will call you later. And then they called me that evening, or I called them. And I said, what's going on? And my mom said, Ma's like, Manu is not going to make it till the 20th. This is March 13th. And she said, if you can, get on a plane and come. Because he has days, not a week. And at that point, I had everything. I had all my paperwork, booking of flights easy, All I needed was a PCR test. And I called the Canadian consulate. I'm like, these are excruciating circumstances. Can you let me on with a rapid test? And they denied me. And this was all the next day on the 14th on Sunday, because I heard about this late night on Saturday. So I went to the closest critical emergency room, got a PCR. The next Sunday, March 14th, my mom said, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Nothing, I'm driving." She's like, "Pull over, tell your brother goodbye. His organs are failing." And that's when I got my husband on, myself on a WhatsApp call in the early hours, morning of March 14th. And he was sedated. He just kept saying, "I love you."
Oh,
And
he could speak back?
barely. He
Yeah.
was totally sedated. They were just keeping him comfortable at this point. And he was on a morphine drip. And I told him, "Let go." I said, "You've done enough suffering. Let go. Let go of, you don't have to wait for me. I will come when I come, and I will make it there. You need to just stop hurting now. And we love you, and I will see you soon." And that was the last time I saw him alive. And after that, I actually got my PCP to hurry up and got my PCR test within a matter of hours. You know how that works. I had special requests because the Canadian consulate needed a PCR.
Right.
And I finally got it. I booked my flight for the 15th. And while I was packing the night, I kissed my kids goodnight. And I said, "Mom's going on a plane," canceled my work for 3. I'm like, I booked one-way ticket. I'm like, I don't know when I'm coming back to work. Just cancel everything. And I got on the plane. But as I was packing from my bag, I got that call. He was gone. He was no more. And my parents were there by themselves. There was nobody around, no family, no friends. Manu was alone
At the hospital when he passed away. Yeah.
at the hospice. Yeah. And so Maya was actually taken in by his palliative nurse. And he talks about Maya. He loved her. And he talks about it in the book. But the palliative nurse actually took Maya in when Manu went into
Hospice.
into hospice, because from hospice, he died the next day. So my parents had nobody to take care of Maya, and they were so like in a panic, like, what are we going to do with Manu? They're like, what are we going to do with the dog? So she's like, I'll take care of the dog. She used to see the dog every time she came to do the drain. So she's like, Maya knows me. I'll take her in. And she eventually adopted the dog, and we get to see, she comes visits once a month. I'll get to see Maya.
Oh.
My kids will get to see Maya when I'll be visiting in Calgary. Yeah. So, but that was how he passed away. It was just alone. And I got to his house March 16th. So I knew flying that I'm going to go there to plan a funeral. And, I didn't get to pick my brother's, wedding outfit or a wedding venue. I planned the funeral. I picked his casket. I picked his wedding suit. These were the little things that my parents couldn't do. Get his suit, iron the suit, get it to the funeral home, pick up the ashes. We did the ash, and we,
Did you get to see his body?
Yeah, I saw him when he was prepped. I didn't get to plan a MC speech or pick his photos for his wedding. I did it all, but I did it for his.
But did you get to hug him one last time, the body? Or hold his hand?
I did get to kiss him. He was very cold, and he looked old. His clothes were so big on him because of the amount of weight he had lost, and his skin was sagging because of such a tremendous weight loss. Right. I couldn't hug him because he was in the casket, but I did get to kiss him a few times.
When you were packing your bags and you got that call, I mean, You can say you're prepared for those things, but nobody's ever prepared.
You're not
You,
prepared.
no, yeah, you had to sit with your thoughts on that plane.
I wrote,
Yeah.
I wrote his eulogy because my dad couldn't speak. He didn't speak at the funeral, and my mom couldn't. So I wrote the eulogy and I wrote it on the plane, and I was crying on the plane, trying to keep this mask on, and I trying to, and I went alone because my husband couldn't leave so suddenly like I did. I just went. I'm like, you come on your March 20th date, and we'll wait for the funeral until then. So I had a week to prep, but it's just, and I think that's the thing about grieving is like you don't know what you're just going through the motions, and your mind processes later on what your body has gone through, the trauma of it all. You absorb the trauma, it comes out in some way, but you don't know what you have gone through until like it hits you a few months. I'm like, oh my God, I just did that. Oh God, how did I do this? And it hits you later on, the grief of it all. You're just checking off the boxes. Okay, casket check, photos check. We got, wherever we need to go. And the sad part is not funny, is the morning of the funeral, instead of concentrating on what I have to do for the funeral, I was on the phone with the with the Canadian Ministry of Canada. It was a Sunday, because I forgot that I had to get a limited release that had to be signed by the funeral home director to be at the funeral, because I was only allowed a certain spots, only my brother's home or my home. And let me tell you, the government of Canada checked in on me. You had to do the ArriveCan app. They did calls. They wanted to verify where I'm getting fresh air from, where I'm getting my food from. They did a drop visit after the funeral. I stayed for a lot longer, but my husband was going to the airport and I was getting to drop him. They actually did a surprise visit to the house. And my dad's like, where are you? And I'm like, on the way to the airport. They're like, you can't go to the airport. You have to come back home because they're here to check on you. Like, we were going through all of that in addition to whatever else we were going through. So the Sunday morning, I'm like, luckily the Minister of Canada, there was Susan, I believe her name was, and she was awesome. She's like, I know your case because I've been talking to her from December when I got my first one. And I'm like, I need a limited release from my husband and myself. I have, I sent all the paperwork in. She's like, give me half an hour. I will approve it. So you can actually go to the funeral home and be there for the ceremony. Because it was just, I had to, all of those things. It was just the circumstances of it all were just extreme, that we had no navigation or no guide to go through it. It was insane.
And you can't make this stuff up.
You cannot make this up. And
oh my goodness.
And Manu and I, like I said, he had been writing. And when I had flown in December, he said, I want to be published. And that's when I had been working on with a publisher. And I asked Manu, let's do this, because I wanted him to see the book in person. And he said, no, I've got time. I got time. Why are you rushing me? I want to write more. However, when he passed, I was at his house. I actually got that Dental Town magazine where he wrote about leaving dentistry. It was published in March 21 edition. And it kind of went viral in the dental field because he passed of oral cancer. And he talks about his dissatisfaction with his profession and how cancer gave him an exit. And it connected me to this whole other field of people, different walks of life in dentistry. And it just totally, and it's included in this book.
I think it was June 9th of last year, so 2021. I actually looked at my Facebook and I had reposted it. So I was thinking, that is interesting. I'm meeting his GD today, and yesterday I was looking on Facebook. I was like, I'm gonna look this up a little bit, and it popped up. Yes, Zach, you reposted this on 2021.
2021 June. He would have been 35. Yeah. So, but it's walking into, and I'm sure you must have felt this when after your mom's passing, like I walked into his space, his house, and everything was there. his blanket, his Lego, which was unfinished. He was building a Batman 3,000 pieces.
Wow.
His food was still there. That he was saving food in the freezer to eat later because people would send over food.
Mm.
And he said, I'll eat that when I'm better. And everything was there but him. So I took all his work and I got this. That's like the one thing I could do for him is get his writings into a book like he wished for. And the writing, that's what he did. So I got his laptop, wrote his story on his words, putting them together. And it was a grieving and a healing process for me. And so this is how, when you talk about how did you stay strong through all of it, I was just thinking, what would he have done? And I just helped complete his story and work through it. And that kind of is a way of me healing and saying, here's my way of helping you. Whatever I couldn't do then, I'm trying to do it now.
The title is so relevant to what happened to all of you. How did the name come up?
That's it. That's how when I walked in, that's how I felt. That was his life interrupted. That everything was the same. The mountains are still there. The sun's shining. Yes. Maya is there. Everything is there. It's just like, it almost, even to this day, feels like he went to this holiday and he'll be back and he'll be like, yeah, look what I did. This is the crazy thing that I did. Or I went, I had this incredible food, or I was just waiting for him to come back and tell me, but that's not there. So the book, it's very interesting. The Dr. Dua Survival Guide is what he called his blogs when he had them online, which are no longer online. They're all here. And there's some interrupted thoughts of his, things that I found were unfinished, essays that were unfinished. And the picture on the back, that's Manu. The last we saw him just before his diagnosis in July of 2019. And that's his canoe in the back and the view that he would take all these pictures and down. Yeah.
That's Vermilion Lakes. Yeah, and that's Mount Rundle. That's beautiful. Yes.
Yeah, that's him. And actually, even the front, we couldn't blow these pictures up. So I happened to have a friend who's a photographer, and she went to Jasper, and she had gotten all these pictures, and I took one of her pictures, and that's how the front of the cover came along. So everything is pertinent to him.
Absolutely. How do you feel now that the book is out, the stories are out?
I feel a sense of like accomplishments, like, where I failed him as time, distance, circumstances. I could not do much for him, especially being in the profession. I feel I'm doing his part, sharing it. And I'm also hoping that this brings the awareness to oral cancer. I talk to my patients about it. I do a lot. Otherwise, there's a cancer walk I do with my the American Dental Association, New York State. I do lectures. Interestingly enough, I was asked for an interview at a lecture at the Pacific Dental Conference, March of 2021. What's interesting about that fact is that that's the city. It was based in Vancouver. It was virtual, but it was based in Vancouver, where Manu graduated dental school from.
UBC.
And March 14th was the start date of the conference. That was his 1-year death anniversary. And the year was this year, right?
2022.
This year, 2022, which would have been his 10-year graduation from dental school.
My goodness.
So it's interesting, I don't necessarily believe in God, but in the power of the universe, how it brought me to that, connected me to this person, Joanne Jones, who got me on as to be on this conference.
Absolutely. And isn't it crazy to see, once someone passes away, a loved one, our lives become so much more meaningful, and the connections to, like you said, whatever you believe in out there. Maybe it's even Manu, sometimes I say it's mom's around me, and that's who's watching over us, kind of a thing. Your connection to world has become so much more meaningful. So when you look at things like dates and times and synchronicity and why things happened, when you look back, you're like, huh, right?
That, yeah, it's energy, right? Your physical energy is not there, but maybe it's energy in some other form that
Hmm.
uh,
Yeah.
we're not privileged to see. Yeah.
Tell me this, doctor, before we get going here is, grief is something that we don't just one day feel. Every day we think of our lost loved ones.
Every day.
Yeah. It's funny. It's not like you can forget them.
No, it's, you learn to live with it.
You learn to live with it. But you're doing things and you smile or you'll just start talking to them and people might call you crazy, but I was doing laundry one day and I remember, oh my God, my mom would be so upset if I folded something this way. I'm like, okay, mom, look, I got it right. So, you just do things to make yourself happy. Do you do that often? Just talk to
Yeah,
him or
I talk to him all the time,
yeah.
and it's interesting how I feel that he talks back, and that's a whole different
Hmm.
topic for another day. But
Right.
there are signs,
Hmm.
if you listen ever so carefully, you do hear them. And one of them is about the Northern Lights. I was telling you
Yes.
how I'd never seen the Northern
Hmm.
Lights. I dragged my mother on March. You saw my little kid.
Yeah, it's funny. He's pulling a fast one.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw the North. I've been to Iceland, never saw them there. I've been to Calgary many times and never saw them, but I saw them on the morning of March 21st, 2021. And there's a Canadian belief that says that the Northern Lights are the
Dancing
old souls,
spirits.
dancing spirits, that the old souls coming down to take the
Yes.
young ones. And my mom, I dragged her out into Adri and in the middle of it, I started taking pictures because they're white and these big floods, you can see it.
Of course.
And I'm like, these don't look like clouds. And I start taking pictures with my amateur camera and they're green. And I'm like, Mom, these are it. These are it. She's like, okay, you're happy? Can we go home now? It's
Yes.
like, yeah. And I'm like, no, this is so exciting because this was right after his death. He died on the 14th. So this is a week later. And,
You know
we
what? They were doing Punga up there for him.
seriously, you're not. And March 21st was the day we cremated him. And that's the day I saw the Northern Lights. And I'm like, look, Manu, and I actually did a post on that. And I'm like, oh, Manu, I see you shining bright up there. And that was the day
Hmm.
we
Hmm.
let go of him, of his physical body. Yeah.
How the system failed you and failed Manu. I
It
think
failed.
that's a I think that's a big thing we'll have to talk about because I think it's the US system versus the Canadian system.
And one of the people who actually flew into, we did a book signing in March here in New York to mark his 1 year death anniversary. So I had a cancer survivor and she does bike. It's called 6-step screening process. She flew into Florida. She's a 24-year survivor, stage 4. She was diagnosed with stage 4 and she survived for 24 years. Manu was diagnosed at stage 2. I firmly believe that it failed. The
Now,
system failed.
now, do you think it's, people can say, oh, it's the pandemic. It was such a tough time, lack of doctors, lack of system, um,
No,
fax machines, you know?
because his initial surgery was 2019, pre-COVID.
Yes, you're right.
So his initial surgery and follow-up care was pre-pandemic. So
And that's where
pandemic,
they went wide, not deep. Get the
right?
lymph.
Right.
Oh.
So it is from, yes, he had a late diagnosis, which I will, have mixed feelings about that. And I don't blame the doctor for anything. We're human, we're doctors. I'm a doctor, we all make mistakes. But it's the continuous lack, so many steps. It's not one person failed, then everybody else kind of helped around and fixed the situation.
Right.
It's the failure after failure after failure. But yeah, I'd love to dwell into that another day.
No,
And
absolutely. Where can people find Manu's book?
this book,
Yes,
it,
Life Interrupted.
yeah, I like to introduce Dr. Dua Survival Guide by him, for which I wrote the epilogue and the foreword just as a way to kind of help finish it. The epilogue talks about Manu's life, how what shaped him. And he was stronger than what his disease was. It's on Amazon.ca. It's at BarnesandNoble.com, but any bookstore, Amazon's the best way. It's on Kindle. And there's a podcast that goes to it with it. Well, I wanted to bring attention to the podcast for a very special reason, two reasons. One is that the person who I did this podcast with, I've never met her, but she read Manu's story and she has her own podcast and she helped me inspire to do this. And it's Dr. Deanna Harris. But also I have interviewed the closest of Manu's friends who are in his inner circle and who are all from Calgary except for two. And they're all dental specialists. There's an ER doctor on there, Dr. Maninder Kalhon. He's an ER doctor who I've known since they went to undergrad together. They met in undergrad. And there's a hospitalist there, Dr. Branko Lazarevic, who's based out, he's in Lethbridge and Calgary. And then the dentists there, they're all specialists. There's Dana Vanan Slade, she's an orthodontist.
Right.
Beach Hall, who and I have a very interesting story, which is a wild story. If you have a minute or two, I'll tell you afterwards.
Is it hard to relive every time you talk about it all the time, or is it getting easier?
It's easier. And Manu's best friend will be there, Don, who is a pediatric dentist in Calgary too, who got the Porsche. Manu gifted him the Porsche in his will. So he'll be there with his family. But yeah, so there are, the people who are, it's like people all who are closest of them.
And then did you guys sell the house, of course, mom and dad? Yeah.
The houses are sold. He had 3 cars, 2, oh my God, the stuff.
Jesus Christ. Okay. Well,
he had 2 old cars. They were like 20 years old. He had beat up cars that he used to drive.
You kept them. It's like, these are memories. Yeah, of course. Started from this.
No, I think it helped to let go. For my parents, it helped to not hold on to something tangible because it's a constant reminder. So for them, letting go was easier.
Like, I need all his clothes. I need to get
I didn't keep
to hold on to things, right? To remember him.
I had somebody take his signature and make me a bracelet. So I wear that anytime I do a book signing. It's his signature from literally, I had him like, give me a piece of paper, anything with a sign on it. And so I wear that. That's one thing. So every time I'm signing a book, I'll always have it. And just as a symbol.
So it's like you two are signing it together.
Right. That's the whole.
That
so I was
super neat.
Yeah, I was in Nashville in last month in July. Yeah. And I was signing and I had that bracelet on. So I got an award for my work in dentistry in Vegas, and I accepted the award with that bracelet on. So anytime it's something related to the book, I always wear it. And
how did you find a publisher? Because there's so many out there.
It was through a friend, and I didn't actually go through anybody. Like I didn't do a checklist. I found somebody on recommendation, and I said, time is of an essence. We really need to get this going. And it's kind of self-published, but she kind of refined it, it gave me ideas what to do and edited it so it looked professional, not just a bunch of writing stuck together, because I would have not written the foreword or the epilogue.
Of course,
so she kind of helped me make it look professional and work through the process. So it's half.
But you're the go-getter. I mean, you're like, Zach, what's going on? And you're on top of everything. Like,
I'm trying, yeah. So I'm doing a few podcasts around. I did Open to Hope, which is based in New York, and it's by 2 psychologists, a mother-daughter team.
Yeah, I watched that. That was great. And then there's another one, Disc something. Disc is a Bollywood one.
Dish Dash.
There we go. Yes.
And I was on Anoki Uncensored with Hina Ansari. Okay. I'll be at Calgary's Red FM when I fly down to Calgary. And I'm actually on with Untangled Grief next Monday, based in London. So the podcast is going to be.
Hopefully I can get a book or 2 from you and signed. Maybe
Yeah,
if it comes in before you arrive, then I can bring them to you.
or I'll bring some copies with me. Yeah, if you get it in before I
I'll
come,
let
I'll
you
have
know.
to
Yes.
sign it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Would you say
I'll send
Amazon's the
you
best? Amazon's probably the best probably.
Amazon.ca. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. That's the best way. Or any bookstore. Yeah. So no, this has been great. You have a very positive. I love your quotes. They're deep.
Yes. They're
Deep.
deep. Well, they hit, right? It's what
Yeah,
we feel, right? At
yeah.
times.
It's very deep. And
And then I paint a lot, as you probably can see. I've seen stuff because it helped me go back to a childhood thing of little things I enjoyed, right?
yeah.
Coloring, you're painting.
All right. And you know what? That's what we did during COVID. We did paint by numbers or puzzles because
Yeah.
you're focusing on that spot and you're not thinking of anything else. And it just helps you
Hmm.
distress, let
Yeah.
your mind.
Do you ever get scared though? It's like memories will fade and how to hold on to them without
That's where you feel that sense of guilt, when I talk about that. Like, uh, so we grew up in different parts of the world, right?
so,
And so when I think back to Abu Dhabi and when Manu was little, it almost feels like it was a different life, not even
oh,
in
okay. Seriously.
lifetime.
Yeah.
But they're there, the memories. I try, it's very hard. But we talk about him. I'd share him with my kids because they're so little to remember him with.
You want to
So
keep Mama's
yeah,
memories alive. Yes.
yeah, yeah. So we finished, actually, I got my kids and my husband and we finished his Batman Lego. I'm trying to finish the things that he started.
Yes, you're like, God, older sister.
I'm like, some days I just tell him like, sure, you're like the typical younger brother, left the older
Yeah.
sibling to do everything. And I have to publish a book, take care of our parents, and finish your Lego.
Exactly. That is great. That's too funny.
So
I
sometimes,
love it.
yeah. But he got the best of my parents. He was always with them. I left home very young. He stayed at home and he went to U of C. He was in Vancouver, it's close to Calgary. And now I have grieving parents. I don't have the same parents anymore.
No, things are different.
It's different. Yeah.
Sorry.
And there's like this, like my dad will say, like, oh, the TV's not working. Let me call Manu. And then that realization that he doesn't exist, that's when it hits you hard. It's those little things. Or you share like a joke and I'll be like, who do I share this with? That's
That would get it. Mom and dad won't get this one.
won't get this or something that like, and then that's the other feeling of like loneliness. When I sit down, like I sat down, and you can share this on your podcast if you edit it. Like I sat down to do Manu's funeral. And, like I said, we picked the casket, the speech, the photos, everything. And all I could think of was, I'm going to have to do this 2 more times for each of my parents. Who am I going to share my parents with? Who am I going to share that silly stories? Oh, look, remember when mom did this or dad did this, or, the silly nuances. I won't have anybody to reflect them with. Sure enough. And that was the thing with Manu too. Like I didn't have his friends to grieve with around me. I didn't have cousins. I didn't have my grandparents. I didn't have my own parents to grieve him around with. And my kids were too little. My husband knew him sporadically that he met him. So I had nobody collectively to share and grieve him with. And thus came this book, the podcast. I didn't have a shield around me protecting me from grief. I had to navigate through it by myself and create this village of people that helped me through the process and come out strong.
Yeah, and to be honest, I'm the same person why I had to start a podcast. I just needed to talk to people, your village, the people that vibe with you, right? And can celebrate and can know that you're not alone, right? Because it is
Yeah,
a lonely journey. It really is.
it is a lonely journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you again.
All right. Thank you so
Thank you.
much. All right. Bye-bye.